Hello, and welcome to the 15th class on David. Let's start with a quick review. Last time we studied the story of God making the covenant with David and how sometimes our good intentions get in the way of what God is doing. When things are going well, we can lose a sense of our dependence on God and our daily need for His grace. But God will use the Nathans in our lives to help us get back on track when we start to move away from God's plan. Today, we'll turn to an often overlooked character in David's story, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, David's best friend, and he's part of 3 different episodes in David's story. We'll backtrack a few chapters to 2 Samuel chapter 4 to meet Mephibosheth. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. When a new dynasty came to power, the new rulers usually assassinated all the members of the old dynasty to eliminate any pretenders to the throne. When news of the deaths of Mephibosheth's grandfather and father reached the people, panic broke out in Saul's palace. The nurse carrying 5-year-old Mephibosheth tripped and Mephibosheth fell, breaking both ankles. Unfortunately, his ankles didn't heal well and he was disabled the rest of his life. Saul's servants fled to the small village to Lodebar, where Mephibosheth grew up in obscurity to escape the notice of the new rulers. Mephibosheth was a true victim, his life forever changed by events beyond his control. He lost his future. He was a member of the royal family, destined for leadership. No doubt, Mephibosheth heard stories of his father and grandfather, how the throne was stolen from him, and how it was all David's fault. It's not hard to imagine that Mephibosheth began to think all his problems were because of others' mistakes and that he wasn't responsible for where he found himself. This is really true, but the victim mentality can lead to feeling bitter and miserable, for wanting revenge, or it can even lead to refusing to face reality and move forward despite circumstances. We all know people like this, where life has dealt them a bad hand, but rather than working to heal and move on, they choose to focus on their losses. It's easy to understand Mephibosheth's life. The second story of Mephibosheth is found in 2 Samuel chapter 9. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." So King David had him brought from Lodebar. Mephibosheth is an adult now, still physically handicapped, but also psychologically wounded. His name can be translated as seething dishonor, which gives us a hint to how he views his life. Strangers now come asking for him because he's wanted in Jerusalem by King David. Imagine his thoughts. Is King David searching high and low to finally destroy the last of Saul's line? Picture his journey to Jerusalem. It's about a 40 to 60 mile trip, which would take between 2 and 3 days of travel. That's a long time to contemplate how the journey would end. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. I wouldn't be surprised if Mephibosheth expected the worst as he hobbled into David's presence, that he was certain he'd hear his death sentence pronounced. Mephibosheth had been beaten down so long, he probably couldn't even look David in the eye. We get a glimpse into what Mephibosheth thought of himself. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Mephibosheth called himself a dead dog. He felt less than human. But that's not what David thought. David said, "Mephibosheth." "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan." David's first act was to call Mephibosheth by name. We return to the importance of a name. When we call someone by their name, we recognize them as a person, not a victim, not a category we reduce people to. Mephibosheth is a person with a past, a present, and a future. The second time David did was to tell Mephibosheth not to fear. Mephibosheth certainly had lots to fear in life. He was afraid he was about to be executed. We understand that fear. Will others use their power, authority, position to diminish us, exploit, or use us, we become cautious, put up walls, increase our defenses. But David is a different kind of king. He's not paranoid like Saul. He's not yet shaken by the jealousies that come later in his reign. David remembered the love he and Jonathan shared, the covenant that bound them together as friends. David sent for Mephibosheth in order to love him. David ruled with justice and equity. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. David is doing the duties of a king, to bring order out of chaos, to guard and fight for the sanctity of people and things, to deliver from injustice and misfortune, to grant pardon to the condemned, to heal sickness, to bring dignity and honor to the people and the land. Now, David adds love to justice and fairness. The Hebrew word translated into English as love is hesed. It has a deep and broad context and is often translated as loving kindness, steadfast love, or covenantal love. This word is often used to describe the love that God has for us. It has overtones of affection, commitment, and reliability. It's the love you see in couples who've been married for decades, weathered many storms, and still hold hands whenever they can. Hesed is love regardless of circumstances, hormones, emotions, or personal convenience. Mephibosheth hadn't been loved like this for a long time. Can you understand how shocked he must have been? This is a crucial moment for David. He must decide how to navigate life as a king. Will he govern with power or love? By manipulation or cooperation? With tight control or with generosity? The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." David was able to ask if there was anyone left of his former enemies he could love because he was secure in God's love. This is a love in action, not some abstract, fuzzy feeling. David gave Mephibosheth Saul's lands so that he would have an independent income and assigned the servant Ziba to manage the estate. Then he brought Mephibosheth into the household to be treated like family. Hesed is an active verb. The final story of Mephibosheth is found in 2 Samuel in the 16th and 19th chapters. Years have passed, and Mephibosheth has been living in David's house. How has he responded to David's love? Has he changed, matured, left victimhood behind? In this story, David's son Absalom revolts, and David is disgraced and on the run. While fleeing Jerusalem, David sees Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant, fleeing also, but no Mephibosheth. The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks, 'Today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom.'" Ziba tells David that Mephibosheth is hoping to avenge Saul and regain the throne. David believes Ziba and promises to give Ziba Mephibosheth's lands if David wins back the throne. Absalom is killed fighting David's army, and David returns to Jerusalem, where it's now time to settle scores. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" He said, "My lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me, and he has slandered your servant to my lord the king." Mephibosheth approaches David unkempt in an attitude of mourning. He tells David that Ziba deceived him, left him behind, then lied to David about Mephibosheth's plans. Now, David knows both stories can't be true. The text here is ambiguous, but scholars tend to believe the account Mephibosheth gives. But David doesn't care. He doesn't cross-examine them, ask for witnesses. This is amazing since the last days had been filled with betrayal and disloyalty to David, and who else has better reason to be disloyal than Mephibosheth? The king said to him, "Why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the land." Biblical scholars suggest that Mephibosheth let slip the long-standing belief among Saul's followers that David had a hand in Saul's death, which is why Mephibosheth loses half his land. Despite that, David chooses to hold on to Hesed. David knew loving others is risky business, but because of God's love, David loved Mephibosheth even when it was hard. Some important takeaways for today. Justness and fairness are enhanced by love. Love is an active verb, not an abstract concept. We're called to love even when it's hard. Now, I'd encourage you to check out the discussion guide, which also includes study suggestions and other activities. Thanks for joining us. Next time, we'll find out how David deals with his sin. Until then, keep the faith.